Okay, long night ahead. The time has reached 4 p.m. I have some folks over in the gallery. I need to silence there. Okay, this study session of the Town of Estes Park Board is now in session. Tote that barge, lift that bale. Who do we have first? Manager Klein talking to us about the 2025 parking year-end review.
I have my presentation all teed up to go. I'm just not sure what button to hit to make it show up on the screens. Thank you.
Just like that.
It's amazing. Good afternoon, Mayor and Trustees. My name is Dana Klein. I serve as your Parking and Transit Manager within Public Works. With me today are Dane Lyon and Miguel Gutierrez, who are with the car park. Dane is a regional manager based in Boise, and Miguel is our new manager here in Estes Park, resident living in town here. So what we're going to talk about today is a current program overview of the parking program, the 2025 program results, an overview of what we've seen this year, and then next steps and some Q&A. This was a drone photo that our police department took on the Sunday of Elk Fest this year. It's illustrative of, maximum capacity, as you can see, and some vehicles driving around through the lots. But I just wanted to show you this because they did some great work taking some great photos for us at the Elk Fest weekend. All right, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the paid parking program goals. These were part of the Municipal Code Ordinance 30-19, and our job in the parking department is to support the town's business districts by making parking available and by encouraging economic development, maintaining adequate turnover of the town-controlled parking spaces, encourage an adequate amount of parking availability for a variety of users through efficient use of perimeter parking locations and the town's free shuttle system and other transportation alternatives, and reduce congestion in travel lanes caused by drivers seeking available parking. This slide shows the 2025 program dates, which were May 23rd through October 19th, so 150 days. We had the paid parking program in daily. It shows the paid parking locations. You'll notice an asterisk next to Bond Park. That Bond Park number of 73 also includes the spaces that are on Park Avenue, kind of in front of or across from where Claire's is, for instance. That area is also considered part of the Bond Park locations. And that was impacted by special events. There were 14 of them this year that closed the Bond Park area. Then we have a couple of illustrative graphs on the right-hand side that show the percentage of total supply, free versus paid currently. 69% of the parking is free. That does include the event center, and that does include the garage. So then we also whittle it down and show another graph that shows the downtown parking supply, which shows the 682 spaces designated in the paid parking locations on the left-hand side, and then the free stalls of the 1,022 downtown.
Dana, what's the total supply in the left graph?
2,174.
Thank you.
This is the map that we included this year in our materials that we printed. This is an illustration of what that map was. You've probably all seen this. There's copies that are flat that we put into map holders. And then we also had the small ones that our team carried around during the year, and we handed these out a lot as well. One thing that we did do this year was add the car park office, which is that gray box at the top that illustrates so that when folks had questions about if they needed to dispute notices, violations, or if they also had questions about permits, we would be able to send them to that location. All right, 2025 program results. But before I get into that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the operational things, kind of the I love me's of what we worked on this year as a team. Dane and I worked really hard, had that kind of crossed out message system up at the top with the yellow and the orange is kind of an illustration of what our 17-page document, looks like, of things that we worked on during the year and before the season rolled out to make sure that things worked smoothly and to work through any issues that we had. We did do the parking structure banner for the second year this year. I think that is really helping during the program days, and then we took that down toward the end of the season. We did the library partnership program again. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about that at the end of this presentation. Car Park rolled out their Karma system, the new permitting system. We had some good results and good feedback on that. The team did a lot of work this year assisting guests and visitors in the field with payment options and directions. We'll talk about it later, but we didn't write as many tickets this year. We spent more time helping people find available parking and payment options. And then we did updated payment signage to focus on the text-to-pay option, which is shown in that image in the top right. What we found in previous years was that folks would come to town, they would want to utilize the online or the app to pay for parking and couldn't get on the network. So now that Verizon, or I think all of the, I guess the cell service providers in the area have upgraded their services from what I can see from the towers that they've been working on. The service is more robust, but we still give that option to sign up for the Wapiti Wi-Fi for free and then go into the app to pay for parking if that's the option they want to take. We also still have the kiosks at each of the lots that folks can use.
Can you just, unless you're going to speak to this in a minute, and then I'll hold my question, but so what is the numbers between the payment types? Where are you seeing the majority of, are they paying through the machines or more through on the app?
This year, there was more payment through the online systems, either the app or through the text to pay than in previous years. When I first started, it was close to 50-50, kiosk versus other options. This year, it's spun around, and if you look at on our website, I don't have it right in front of me, but on our KPIs that we put up each week, we have that data on there, and the graph is definitely moving more toward the online payment portal or using the app than the machines. I think one of the reasons for that is Park Mobile, for one, is being more adopted in more locations throughout the country. So people will come here a lot and say, and we had this question a lot during the year where someone would say, oh my gosh, you know, I have a rental car, but I used my Park Mobile app that I use where I'm from, and it used my vehicle. So how do I show that I paid? And, you know, we just as a team get together and we'll hand out a card similar to this one that we used during the beginning of the year. That's our oops card, we call it, where if somebody paid or forgot to, we'll give them this and say parking's on us, or it says this person already paid. And then our team knows not to ticket that vehicle.
Could I add something to that?
Yeah.
Just my observations in the
Come on
field
up here.
too. Hi there. Just briefly, with my observations in the field too, I think those signs were extremely productive. A lot of people gravitated toward those signs. You see the QR code, and they just generally have a sense that that's where you go to make payment. And I saw a lot of utilization coming from those. So I think those signs were very helpful for us.
To follow up on that, let's say they're shopping, they pay 2 hours for on that. Do we have any data that shows us that they go back in and sign up for more time? And can you speak to those numbers? Like, are they signing up for 1 more hour, 2 more hours, and how many people?
We do have that data. I don't know that we have it broken down to that level of detail yet, but when we show you the graph later for when people have paid, there's a 1 hour or less category, and that keeps going up each year. So Dane was working on that earlier today to try to grab that, anticipating a question very similar to this where we can show that information. I don't have it right in front of me, but more and more people, I believe, are starting to add an hour.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying is the average like 2 hours, and then they, you know, get enjoying the town and find, gosh, 2 hours isn't near enough. And I'm wondering, surely they can just go back in, right, to that app and add? They don't have to go back to their car.
Yes, they
I
can.
take
In
it.
fact,
I
the
don't
app
use
will,
it, so I
yeah,
don't know.
the app will
Okay.
actually send you a reminder when your time is getting near the
Oh,
end
okay.
and give you the option to add time if you want
Okay.
to.
So, yeah, that is that option increasing is what I'm curious. I'm
Yes.
hoping that we're seeing people wanting to stay longer.
And you can distill that data.
Yeah, I have that report now.
Oh, you got it? Okay. I'll let you bring that up while I go to the next thing, if you're okay with that. Okay. So this is the first page, and you'll notice this presentation is very similar to last year's with regard to even the data and the numbers, because it keeps showing the same information. But one of the things that is different on this one from previous years is Baldwin Park. You'll notice there are, 10 columns for Baldwin Park to show the peak occupancy. And that's because during the construction times, the lot numbers changed a lot. So if we left it at what the lot it shows now, 94 or 88, depending on how, or 91 or 88, depending on how we count those spaces, that number would have been at 150, 200, because at times there were only 19 or 18 spaces available in that lot. So one of the interesting things on this graph is obviously the 85th percentile line, which is that dotted line. In the parking industry, it's a respected, I guess, theory that once you hit the 85th percentile, the lots or the location feels full. So that's a number that's a number that usually is an indicator that we need to change something or pull a lever somehow to make a difference on getting that number back down if possible, or letting people know that that lot is full. So during the 2025 season in the paid lots, you can see that the season average was 94%. So that ticked up. It wasn't quite, it was actually 93 point something higher, but we rounded it to 94. So that number keeps ticking up for peak occupancy. And the peak occupancy, that's another thing I need to call out, is if we just did straight peak occupancy for every day, it'd be 100%, right? So what we do is we do an average of the peaks during the day when the car's driving through or when we're doing observations of the lot to show what that peak was at that time. And then the system will take all of those and average that peak for the time, or else it would just be 100% as a massive peak.
Yeah, does your data show how much of the time you've hit 100%?
I believe it does. I haven't parsed that out completely to show what that is, but
Yeah, I'd be curious about that.
okay. Yeah,
5% of the transactions were people adding time.
you got to come up and, yeah.
Gotcha, sorry. 5% of the transactions were people adding time to their stays.
This one shows the 25 data for peak occupancy for the free lots. This one also went up 1%. You'll notice on the right-hand side of the graph, there's a table that shows the days that the garage was at the 85th percentile or higher. It was 20 at the time that we did this. It's actually 21 if I count the parade of lights. We filled the garage on that day as well. So 21 times that the garage was at 85th percentile or higher, which is a good trend. It's going in the right direction, I believe, where people are starting to notice that this is a viable option for parking. Then we break out the data by weekdays and weekends, and this one shows for the paid lots, the peak occupancy Monday through Thursday only. It has the average and the peak for each month of the year that we had paid parking. So you'll notice big, tall numbers in May at 96th percentile. That's because that only included 9 days of May. We started on the 19th, and then October went through the 19th. The number for July is always a bit higher for peak and for average, because we find that a lot of folks come for the whole week. They'll, because that's when a lot of people have days off and vacations, and they'll come for an entire week. So that is usually higher, and then it usually falls off a little bit. September and October definitely fell off for the weekdays in the paid lots.
Do you see an opportunity there to modify the schedule that we charge to park to encourage visitation on weekdays in the fall? I noticed this year it seemed pretty, consistent with, some of the information you've provided to us that there's lots of parking space. And if our objective is helping people find spaces and move traffic, then maybe we have an opportunity there to enhance visitation by saying these are free parking days. How do you envision that working in the program?
I don't know that I would be able to comment on how that would look completely as a plan, but it's definitely an opportunity that we could look into for the new year.
Okay.
My mind goes all over of,
Yeah.
we'd have to change signage and change rate things and notifications, and I don't think I could comment completely on that at
Sure.
this time.
Sure. But I didn't hear you say no.
That's correct.
Okay.
Here is weekday for the free lots, which is lower. This excludes the events complex, but does include the garage. These numbers are all below the 85th percentile on an average and on a peak. And obviously, the garage brings that number down. If we took that out and just did the downtown, that number would be higher. Friday through Sunday paid lots. Again, we want to call out the Bond Park event closures. There were 14 of them during the season, but you can see how those numbers, again, if we did straight peak for each month of that, it'd be 100% because there's always a weekend where everything fills up. So this is an average of those numbers. And these are definitely at the higher end of what you look for where a lot feels full toward the 85th percentile, between 10 and 5. All right, here is the weekend for free lots, again, excluding the event center, but including the garage. This trend shows just the same as the paid in my mind. If we didn't count the garage and just did downtown, we would show those numbers much higher, but we do count the garage to be fair for the entire system. But we still don't count the 454 spaces at the event center, just because it's underutilized from. It's included in that 2,174 space number I gave you, but it's not one that we aggregate into this data.
Do you think that it's hard to keep track of when we do include a lot or we don't include a lot or we change, we look at, is there a way to have that information include all of the free lots or all of the paid lots? It feels like it is a little bit biased one way or the other to make a point that we have a parking issue, but if we're looking at the numbers in the same way every time, we always include the event center lot. That's always a free option. Do we need to include that in every chart that we look at?
I could do a separate set of data and show that.
How would that impact the numbers, do you think, with the free lot?
It would
Would
drop.
Drop the numbers,
Significantly.
right?
Yeah, significantly. Even with reaching peak, you can see this, 72% of the folks paid for 2 hours or less. This is the graph that kind of goes to what Trustee Youngland asked earlier, where the T2 and the Park Mobile purchases during the season. You'll see that number, 31% for 1 hour. That number also includes less than 1 hour. And you can do that through the Park Mobile app, just level up some time if you need to. But for the most part, it's between 1, 2, and 3 hours. And again, the parking team, we're at fault for probably that number being that high, because when we're in the lots and people ask, how long should we stay? We usually tell them, well, probably 2 hours is a good start, and then you can add time if you want, and we tell them how that works. So we probably are responsible for skewing this number a little bit.
So I've got a question. Locals get 2 hours free parking downtown. Are those not included in any of these numbers?
Not in this number. No, this is just for
But I mean
payments.
occupancy too.
Yes. Yeah, those are
They
included.
are included in that.
Yeah, the occupancy, the way the occupancy is
Okay.
calculated is.
So even though you're scanning license plates and that's one that says, no, we don't give them a ticket, right?
Correct.
So, okay.
Correct. I've got a graph that shows that here in just a moment. And here it is. So what we did for this graph was the team went through specific days, and we used the same days we used last year. And it's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I believe, pick these dates for each month. And then this is just the locals, the local 2 hours that we graphed of a percentage of capacity. So we used 1,305 spaces instead of the 1,000 or whatever that was shown earlier, because we did want to include the garage on this one. To Trustee Igel's point, here we go with a different set of space numbers. But because we have locals that do park at the garage, but this shows that all of them use 15 to 18% of total supply. The way that we calculated this was the local permits were 8.5% on weekdays and 5.2 on weekends, and then the remainder was the employee convenience and residential permits. Some of the residential vehicles stay in those spaces during the day because the residents live here.
Dana, do you have any hypothesis as to why June is so much higher than some of the other months? That's just so, maybe just because it hasn't gotten too crazy downtown, so people are more inclined maybe to go?
Well, I'd have to look at that June 18th, but if that was a Thursday, then we could assume that a lot of those went to the farmer's market. I don't have a calendar in front of me to see if that
Yeah.
is the case, but
But to see it on the 21st and the 18th, to see those bumps are just interesting.
yeah. I don't have a reason for that right off the bat, but that's what I would put some of that to. Okay, this one shows paid parking fees related to the contractor expenses. So this is to remain consistent with the way this has been done and presented in the past. There's a lot of asterisks that go with these because of delayed activation for lots during 24 and 23, and 22 was the 10 to 5 hours. And before that, it had been 10 to 6. So we just tried to keep everything consistent. So we had transient revenue budgeted at 797,000 of the total 859 that we put into the budget. The actual paid parking fees only were 761,677. So we're a little bit down on that, but from the charts I showed you earlier, and we talked about that for September and October, there were less folks downtown during those days. So I believe that attributed to some of that. Then the budgeted expenses for contractor, you'll notice in 2025, that number was really big. And that's because when we had talked about the budget last year for this, we knew that we were going to have an RFP go out, and I wasn't sure if the numbers were going to be similar to what they'd been when the RFP was issued back in 2020. I was wrong, obviously, and the numbers are much lower, which is great. So far, the actual contractor expense has been 316 out of the 562. So some of that will obviously fall to the bottom line for revenue in the parking fund. Community and customer input. These are some of the opportunities that we took during 2025. We made a presentation to the CSOs of what the program was going to look like this year. Obviously handed out to that team a lot of these maps, and they were great ambassadors for us for the program, at least to get folks to the parking garage when all the other parking was full downtown. We translated the materials into Spanish. This was an example of what that looked like, and we had this available for folks. We did outreaching to lodging partners. We had a lot of these maps put in. Dave Rusk is the one that helped us with this, and we put these into a lot of different hotels and locations so that people knew the options. The car park team, we talked about this last year, but they did a great job purging permit records and eliminating duplicates so that when we send out that email this next year that says, hey, if you haven't changed your car or anything, you're all set, your 2-hour permit is ready to go, it's cleaned up. And that's been very helpful. The parking team really helped out a lot with the farmers market setup and takedown and traffic control each week. They would go in on Wednesday night, put up some cones around the perimeter to hold those spaces, and then they were over there Thursday morning before anybody else getting things set up, and then they were there all day to help with parking options for folks in the garage or answer questions, and then obviously the takedown. Our library partnership, which we have a highlighted slide next that we did, and then we conducted an end-of-season permit holder survey, and we'll go into a little bit of that. So the library partnership, some of you are aware of this. We ran this last year too as a pilot, and it is super successful. In fact, Miguel went to get his library card, and they asked, do you need your parking permit? Do you need that all set up? So they're doing a great job of getting people signed up or giving them the option to get signed up for their local permit while they're at the library. And we appreciate that. Okay, then this year, near the end of the paid parking season, I believe it was the second week of October, we sent out a 9-question survey to all permit holder addresses we had on file, I think it was about 5,000. And of that, over 1,500 responses came back to us. As of this meeting, I think there were 1,501. We still have the survey open because there's no need to close it right now. We just want to get as much data as we possibly can. And this chart kind of showed of those people that we sent the email to in the permit survey, what type of permit did they have? And obviously the biggest number is going to be the local 2 hours. So most of the data that we got was from the local 2-hour local residents. One of the questions that we asked of the 9 was, how would you rate your experience with the registration process? And you can see from this, 81% said it was positive or very positive. They also, each one of the questions had some type of free form that you could put, and that's why on the right-hand side where it says very positive, positive, neutral, it had other options that people could put in. And I think the bar chart, the way that we have the pie chart set up, it's not going to slice and dice all those one-offs, but we have all those comments from folks. Another question we asked was if you selected online as the answer to the previous question, which the previous question was how did you get your permit? What we wanted to know was how was it navigating to your desired permit type? And did you complete the process? And again, most folks said it was very easy, somewhat easy, or didn't have an opinion on that. This one was one of the free-form questions that we had, which was, what improvements in the parking permit experience would you like to see for 2026? A lot of folks, 682 people, gave us their comments and opinion, which I really appreciate, and we're going through each of those. But what I did was have AI aggregate some of those and give us a this is a snapshot of some of those highlights. This is just one page of probably 2 that the AI bot gave us of kind of distilling those comments. So of those 682, our team is right now going through all of those. And Tia in our office has put together a chart that she's got color-coded that says things like, this was a complaint that we should work on. This is something that could be educational. This is something that we could respond back if we can get their information and explain to folks. So great data that we have. This one kind of ties back to the one we looked at, which had the permit, the 120-minute permit, the 2-hour permittees and how often they park, their frequency. What surprised me on this was that most of the folks said they come fewer than 2 days per week. And again, that's the locals, right? Because most of the respondents were local. And then a lot of them were 2 to 4 days per week, which I believe, and I think I said this last year, I think a lot of the permit holders that have the 2-hour permits, the locals, come down during the weekdays and then kind of stay away during the weekend. And that's what that chart kind of showed earlier that had those higher numbers on the weekdays. Here are some key takeaways that we had. A lot of this, again, is a carbon copy of the one that we went through last year during the presentation, where, it's constant change. The team did good with adjustments and rolling, answering questions, helping folks. The guests and residents are learning the system. That was evidenced, I think, by a lot of the comments that we got where folks said, I like having the 2 hours, I wish I had 3, or I wish I had all day, or things like that, but they're learning the systems. And then our customer service interactions within the permit systems, I should have made that more clear in there, but what I was talking about was the customer service interactions based on the survey that we did were trending to more positive or neutral, and our payment compliance at all the lots is up. And the program is good, but obviously we hit the breaking point during the fall months when it's so beautiful out and we have all the events in Bond Park. I think that contributes to it. And one thing that we did see again this year was ridership on the peak was very popular. Over 113,000 people rode our transit system this year, 71,000 on the red route alone. And I think part of that was due to the new configurations. And I think at your next study session in January, I'll come and talk to you about the transit system. All right, here's another one of the drone photos that the PD took. This was on Elkfest Sunday. And you can see a lot of cars, my mouse doesn't work on here, but you can see a lot of cars on the roadways on Wonderview on each side of the fog line. And it was just a beautiful picture, so I had to grab it and put it in here. Okay, next steps. So between now and March, we're going to keep going through all this data and reviewing all this feedback, and then coming back to you in early March with consideration for the 2026 daily and permit fee recommendations. We're not ready to do that. I think the report that we sent out to you all that was in your packet kind of talked about there are some nuances going with the Whimsadoodle project, and we're, with financing with that potentially and things. So we're just going to go through the data now and then come back to you with recommendations.
Do you anticipate any major quantum dramatic changes to the program, or will it most be tweaking and tuning?
I think it'd be mostly tweaking and tuning, but as a parking professional, if it was just one little location, I think we'd be making some bigger changes. But I think it's just going to be tweaking and refining the program that we have now.
Bill?
Yeah, Dana, obviously we would, in an ideal world, hit that 85% all the time, which, in the current environment, we're not going to do that. What are our options to reduce that peak number in our community?
Well, just like the downtown parking management plan recommends, there are some levers that you can pull. One would be rate modifications. One would be changing some of the areas that are currently free to a paid program, adding more capacity. So, I see the first two as viable now, but I don't think I'm ready to comment on which ones those would be. But I would look at very similar to what we talked about when we were discussing financing for the Bighorn parking structure, where it'd probably be something with a combination or within those two levers that we would activate, which would be either adding more paid inventory or changing rates.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in getting your recommendation down the road as to which levers to pull and which are the most viable and practical and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So appreciate your attention to that.
You bet. That's what we're working on. I mean, we're crunching data. Dana and I were just doing that earlier today, looking at different numbers, and it's parking is passionate, and we have to balance what we have with what the needs are, for sure.
It looks to me like you've given a good report, and that was the amount of time that we had allotted to this item. Anything else you need from us?
No, thank you for your time and attention.
Okay, thanks, fellows.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the second item on the study session agenda, Development Code Update, Residential Housing Typologies. Our friend Eric from Design Workshop is here. He's bought a house in Estes, and
I should probably buy a house here.
yeah, you should buy it now. It'll just be more expensive later. So.
Steve, could you help us pull this up?
So this looks like a similar, except residential this time, where we'll be going through the typologies.
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll add a little bit of
Yeah.
color to that here in a moment. Apologies, we're just getting the presentation pulled up.
For what it's worth, I'd actually never visited Estes Park before we started this project. I'm completely taken.
This is the first time ever?
I love your town.
Oh, wow.
come back
came
with
before
my family
today.
for summer.
Well, yeah.
It's been so funny.
Oh, wait till the tree turns on. You'll like it even better. Our
really?
big digital tree out.
I live in the Roaring Fork Valley, so Aspen, Carbondale area. And I've been in Colorado for 20 years and just never made it up to this part of the state. But it's been a real treat getting there too.
Apologies, we're just trying to get the presentation pulled up.
You know, I'm amazed at the diversity of the state all the time. You know, I have some friends that live down in the San Luis Valley. That feels like a totally different state. And my family lived in Durango for a long time. That feels like a completely different place. You know, it's a big state for sure. Yeah. There was a good sized spruce tree down on the Peak to Peak when I was down
There we go.
Okay, perfect.
Do you want your laptop too?
No, I'm probably okay. Just have it just there for now. Okay. Hi, everybody. Appreciate the patience. Great to see you all again. Eric Krongold, Design Workshop, joined by Philip Spino. Excited to be back in front of you all for another discussion related to the development code. Before we get started today, just a couple notes. The topic of today is housing, but housing and the creation of diverse housing types in the community is so much more than just saying you can build a duplex here and you can't build a duplex here, changing the permissible use table. Creating diverse housing is really about altering the underlying conditions that allow you to build in the first place. So you can say you can build a duplex, but if you don't have the appropriate setback requirements or the appropriate size parking requirements, building that becomes moot. It's just impossible with the code. So while we're talking about housing today, what we're really talking about is the underlying conditions that are going to allow us to build this diverse housing. So just want to clarify that. The other thing is, as we're going through these, we have a couple questions for you all. We'll likely have some follow-up questions. It's one of those things where you submit the presentation and then 5 days later you go, oh my God, I wish we would have asked that. So please excuse us if we do have those follow-up questions. If you do not feel comfortable answering them, no problem at all. And likewise, feel free to interject at any point with any questions. So we'll start, this should look somewhat familiar. We'll start just talking a little bit about housing in the community today, some of the challenges and applicability, a little bit of what we've heard from staff, a lot of the feedback we've gotten from the community, and then what we've heard previously from you all. Talk a little bit about how we're going to set up the discussion and then get into the bulk of things, which is really the specific topics. This is our third work session with you all. I think the last two have been great. That's more topical. You'll see us again in January, but that'll be really more about community engagement and providing some a full introduction to our report and really what we heard throughout the summer and fall of this year. So starting out with just challenges, importance, and applicability. None of this should be new. We've talked a lot about this before. I know you all have heard it from many folks in the community, but Estes Park is a hard place to build. They're not making any more land, and you all have some really challenging conditions with which you're building in. You have a lot of steep slopes. You've got sensitive wildlife and habitat areas, which really makes this less a question of expansion of the town and housing and more about evolution. And how can we selectively evolve and use strategic infill to evolve housing within the town without necessarily having the condition of having more land like some communities do. Affordability is an issue. It continues to be an issue. And I think housing and what we'll talk about today and facilitating the creation of some of these housing types is a really nice way to create some lower price products. It allows folks either aging in place within the community who maybe need to downsize or folks who are looking to enter the community and stay here and put down roots, the ability to do so. It looks to remove some of the ambiguity or conditions that would drive costs up in housing. And we'll talk about this specifically. Parking is a great example of different types of things that can drive costs up. And in a situation like we find ourselves today where we're dealing with tariffs really high labor costs and the construction of housing itself is becoming more and more challenging. What do we have to control that can bring some of those down? We're also dealing with a condition where you have short-term rentals chewing up or using up some of the housing within the community. So again, diversity and increasing stock is more important. We'll talk a little bit about ADUs indirectly, but really creating conditions that we can have ADUs develop more easily within the community. And again, creating different housing types that can help to meet the needs of workers and senior citizens and those in the community. So why does all this matter with relation to housing? Again, none of this should be a surprise or new, but it really helps to create a space where you can set down roots and grow. And I like to think of it that my needs for housing were very different when I was 22 than they are right now when I'm 35, and they're going to be really different when I'm 45 and 65. And having different types of housing in the community, both rental and for sale, that can allow me to jump from spot to spot and stay there is really important.
And from a sort of tourist economy standpoint, having a large diversity of housing typologies in the community supports the retention and attraction of a workforce that's going to be able to support your economy, and not just sort of service industries, but as your economy continues to diversify, people who can serve in a professional capacity as well. And so again, that gets to that need for a diversity of housing types to service the economy as well as the community.
Mm-hmm. From a property rights perspective, by adjusting certain regulations, you can make it easier for folks to do things on their property that would otherwise, they'd have certain encumbrances in with the code, how it's written today. Some of the changes that we'll talk about can also help to contribute to, I think, the larger vision that we've heard through both the Estes Park Comprehensive Plan as well as folks in the community of creating kind of walkable, I'll call it kind of cozy neighborhood conditions. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this can help to reduce barriers for both individual homeowners and private developers. And the thing that I want to underline here with this last bullet point is we're trying to come up with solutions that create incremental, context-sensitive, I'll say redevelopment or evolution. We've heard loud and clear that there's not a lot of interest or appetite for creating conditions that allow really large apartment buildings to go up where they don't belong, and we understand that. But there are really nice ways through some of the things we'll talk about today to get short-term wins that allow you to add, a couple housing units here and there. And it may not sound like a lot, but once you compound that over 10 years, you can add 100, 200 units, and that does make a difference. So applicability and kind of what we'll be talking about and how it's affecting certain things. So really what we're talking about today is around existing zone districts. It may have some overlap on new zone districts. We're not thinking of adding many districts. I think really the two that have jumped to our mind is the mixed use district, which we've talked to you all about, which would likely be in areas where there's some type of existing commercial district. And the one thing that you all don't have today is a parks district, a parks district. And that's something that would go into a lot of parks land is currently zoned commercial. So really this is about existing zone districts and a select few that we'll touch on here. It's about new development, infill development, and redevelopment projects. And really for our listeners at home and in the audience, this is not saying that if we overhaul these recommendations today, you have to go and adjust your home to make it compliant. That's not the case. We don't want anyone to think so. This is really about new projects. We've talked before on non-conforming lots. Some of what we'll talk about today gets at some of that issue and helps to create a little clearer pathway for folks to navigate that. And we are going to touch a little bit on PUDs. Currently today they're only allowed in select areas of the community, but we do think there is a pathway for them to be allowed in more residential communities. We'll talk about why, and we'll open that up to discussion. So Philip, talk a little bit about some feedback.
So the community and stakeholder and staff feedback process has been central to how we've structured our code update process from the beginning. Being responsive to that feedback and turning that feedback into actionable draft code language for your review and approval, that's the key operation here. And so from the beginning, we have worked closely with staff to design a process that is gathering as much volume and diversity of input from stakeholders and residents in your community as we can. Those have ranged from one-on-one conversations with members of the development community or the business community or neighborhood associations, all the way up to, Jane Q. Public on the street and seeking their feedback as well. Some of that feedback focused on housing typology. And I think Eric touched on this really eloquently a moment ago, but I'll just repeat. People have been really clear. This community is not interested in large-scale development. This community is not interested in significant changes to specifically building heights or significant density increases. We hear that, and we're going to help you design code that's responsive to that feedback. Folks are also interested in making sure that the character of this community as being a rural mountain community is preserved. That means more open space. That means more green spaces. And we believe that we will present to you draft code language that is going to achieve the dual objectives of meeting your long-term housing objectives for your community and doing so in a way that's sensitive to that context. And the feedback that we've gotten from people has been really helpful in our ability to do that. From our standpoint, you can see some of the numbers on the screen. These bear out the feedback around the desire for yes housing and yes character, right? So people are interested in duplex and cottage court and ADU and townhome developments, less interested in more denser type of development. Some of the questions that we asked were focused on things like allowing a broader mix of housing types to ensure alignment with the comprehensive plan. I, on a personal level, was surprised and pleased at how many residents and stakeholders in your community are aware of the contents of your comprehensive plan and broadly supportive of it. And so again, we're designing regulations that are going to be responsive to that. There's a broad interest in a wide range of housing types. Townhomes, duplexes, and cottage courts are where we're focusing our energy right now. And we believe that we'll be able to design, to Eric's point earlier, from a back-end standpoint, specific zoning standards that will allow the development community, because that's who ultimately delivers housing to market, to allow the development community to have the clarity they need to deliver these housing types for you. Again, there's a preference for smaller lots rather than taller buildings. This gets to a little bit the conversation we'll have about PUDs later on in the presentation, because some flexibility in zoning is a great tool to achieve those sort of dual side-by-side objectives. Focusing that or allowing that in residential zones would be a change from your current code, and it's something we're interested in sort of unpacking for you later in the discussion. We've said this several times in different contexts, be it around design guidelines or some of the other conversations we've had in the past, but clear, flexible standards and streamlined process is a great way to create value for developers to help them bring more units to market in your community. And it also, I think, would be a significant benefit to the staff, because we've heard from them as well that some clarity and some greater efficiency in the code would help them serve their customers and your constituents more effectively. And then trying to, again, strike that right balance between not going up too high and not going out too far, and maintaining that community character was something that was broadly reinforced by the community engagement that we conducted. With respect to mixed use zoning and a greater diversity of housing typologies, you can see from these what I'll call sort of heat maps, there was some agreement about the appropriate geographic locations in town for mixed use zoning, the appropriate locations in town for a greater diversity of housing types. And there's also some agreement between underlying zoning, your current zoning map, and where some of these locations are.
And if there's one thing I could just interject with this, this corresponds directly to why we're not going to be looking at every zone district. We heard pretty loud and clear from the community, we didn't get dots everywhere. We got dots somewhere. So that's why when we come to you a little bit with some specific recommendations for zones to look at, this is why. Sorry, Philip.
No, please. A targeted approach to looking at the right zone districts and the right modifications to those zone districts, as opposed to a sort of more broad-brushed approach to changing broadly development standards in the community. The feedback bore that out. The feedback we've gotten from your Planning and Zoning Commission and from you in different discussions bears that out for us as well. And adding a mixed-use zone and allowing for more and different housing types, it really reinforces a number of the policies and objectives stated in your comprehensive plan. So there's some really good alignment there, which we feel really confident working within.
So, talk a little bit about the framework for the discussion. My wife's a lawyer, and she likes to say that correlation doesn't equal causation. She's wrong when it comes to zoning codes. This is a case where there's both correlation and causation. This is really for our viewers in the audience at home. The function of the built environment that you see, every building, is really an intersection of two things. It's an intersection of the zone districts, and it's an intersection of the land use development code. So we're going to be making most changes to the development code, some subtle changes to the zone districts, but really for folks at home and listening, we just want to make sure they understand kind of why we're looking at this in the first place. When we think about what controls the structure, I like to think of it as if you have a big clay box, there's different things pushing and pulling and squeezing it, and it's several different factors that can control the size and shape and location of that building. Things like lot sizes, setbacks, floor area ratios, densities, open space requirements, heights, parking requirements, and lot coverage. And all of these in conjunction creates the shape of that building. And in communities just like yours, you need to meet those requirements. And if you meet them, that results in whether you have a slightly misshapen box or a large flat building or a really tall building.
And I would just note too, tying back into the need for affordable and workforce housing, the dimensions of that box translate directly into market price for the box, right? And so we're talking about the size of boxes, the number of boxes, and the power of your development standards to deliver the right size box at the right price point to achieve community objectives.
Thanks, Philip. Not every community has all these requirements, yours included. Some of these don't exist as the code exists today. So we're going to focus our discussion on a couple of these factors, not all of them. And I think it's important just for me to clarify both to you and for those listening why we aren't looking at some of these. We're going to be looking at lot sizes. We're going to be looking at setbacks. Floor area ratio, or the ratio of the floor area of the structure relative to the lot size, was repealed in 2017 from the land use code. And really, floor area ratio becomes important when you have the ability to play with height, because then you can create a smaller lot coverage and a higher building. Because we've heard from you all, we've heard from the community that height's really a non-starter, we didn't feel like it was necessary to kind of bring back this discussion of floor area ratio. Density as well. We know density is a sensitive topic. It's not one I think we're looking to change too much. The density, some of these changes would look to affect conditions where you had a lower density than what's currently allowed with the code. And for instance, a lot split would allow you to create a house, an additional unit that was still under the existing density threshold. So we're not looking to modify that too much. Private open area requirement. You all actually have really low private open area requirements. This is generally the size of the undeveloped area relative to the development area of a lot. In a lot of communities I see it's 25%, 20%. It's 15% for Estes Park. So we felt that was already pretty low. We felt that given what we've heard and the importance of open space and wildlife, we didn't want to lower that any further. So we'll leave that be. Height, I've mentioned. There's not really no desire to touch height. We'll touch on parking and lot coverage. There's lot coverage requirements in the commercial zones, but not in the existing residential zones. So lot coverage in and of itself becomes a direct effect of setbacks. And setbacks kind of act as that de facto thing controlling lot coverage. We felt it didn't make sense to add another regulation in place if it doesn't exist today, so we'll focus the conversation more on setbacks. So for the discussion today, we'll talk a little bit about the factor that we want to look at. We've got some imagery just to show how this may play out. And then just to kind of talk through what impact does it have on things like creating diverse housing types, increasing housing stock, creating some clarity from a regulatory perspective and aligning the comprehensive plan. And we've just got check marks for where some of this comes into play.
And I would just note, as we move through the rest of the presentation, the examples, the imagery, they are examples. They're to be illustrative. They're not specific recommendations. Sometimes that can catch people up, and so I just want to be really clear about that.
Thanks, Philip. So we'll start with lot size. And lot size, just broadly as a definition, is the minimum required size of a parcel you need to develop. decreasing lot size can affect the number of lots in an area naturally, but it's also a great way to allow incremental housing to get slotted in areas that are already developed. This is a table showing your existing lot standards within the community. I mentioned before, we're not going to be looking at every zone district. We've chosen for our work to really focus on the R1, R2, and RM zone districts, omitting the estate lot districts. That's a large part of the community. And I've got a quick map I want to flip to here just to illustrate this. So when we talk about some of these changes, we're really looking at smaller, already denser pockets of your community. We're not necessarily looking to change the kind of larger, more rural estate portions of the community. And this coincides with some of the feedback we received on that map earlier of where folks are interested in more housing. Now, if this group feels that we should be looking at those other areas, please by all means tell us. We're happy to do so. But from a lot size perspective, you've got varying lot sizes between a quarter acre, 5,000 square feet, 18,000 square feet for a single family, and 27,000 square feet for a duplex, which is huge. That's 4 times larger than the lot that I live on for my single family home. And then 5,400 square feet per unit for the RM district. Adjusting lot sizes are really helpful when you have a larger lot and you want to create a condition whereby somebody can do a lot split. And in doing so, create a smaller housing unit on that lot. It's a really nice way to increase diverse housing types in the community, maybe get a really small single family home on there, increase housing stock through that, and we feel this creates alignment with what a lot of the comp plan was trying to get to. And this is what it can look like in practicality. We see this a lot where you have a family who owns, let's say they own a 6,000 or 7,000 square foot lot, and they want their in-laws to come live with them, but they don't really have the ability to develop a carriage house. They do a lot split, and they'd build, maybe they have a 3,000 square foot lot, and they'd build a small single family home. In my old neighborhood, this was really common where we had 10,000 square foot lots. Somebody would come in, do a lot split, so you had 2 5,000 square foot lots, and build 2 housing units where there was once one. It can be a really nice way also to facilitate some of these kind of smaller cottage conditions. So not necessarily thinking about a lot split, but if you have a larger tract of land and a developer wants to come in or an individual wants to come in and build these smaller cottage homes, this can be a great way to do that. Have a 4,000 square foot lot, build these really small, homes that are really meant for particular groups, and create some additional housing, smaller, more affordable housing stock within the community. This is an example. They have some housing they're doing up in Leadville right now. So this is I believe it's a 4,000 square foot lot they developed this on. But it's kind of a long, narrow home, but they were able to get a lot of these into a smaller subdivision area where they identified as wanting to create some more affordable housing conditions. So we're not going to get into specifics today of what size these lots should be, but I think it's more of a broader philosophical question for you all is, are you in favor of us lowering lot sizes within specific zone districts to enable some of this kind of incremental infill? And of the 4 districts we have here, are you in favor of us pursuing those lot size changes within these 4 districts, or should we be looking at more or less zone districts? Pause there.
Thoughts? A meditative group tonight.
Well, I don't think anybody's really, I don't want to speak for the entire board by any means, but I think we're a lot of it quiet because I don't think anybody really wants to decrease lot size. I mean, I know I don't. It doesn't mean it can't be a solution to some of the problems. And so I don't think that's why I'm not jumping up and down and go, yeah, let's decrease lot sizes. And I'm assuming that's kind of what everybody's kind of thinking also, but I'm that's the assumption, obviously. I do think I'd rather that than having big apartment buildings or fourplexes or something like that. So it's a thought, and I still have to mill it over, but that's why I, for one's not jumping up and down and running for the microphone until nobody else spoke.
Well, you got the lights lit by making your statement, so.
I am intrigued by it. I think I understand we're on the higher conceptual level, but of course I'm like, okay, to what? Like what, how low are we talking and where? And I think what's catching me is what's so interesting is that we're not looking at a state at all. That really caught my ears. And I want to be careful on how I say that, but the instinct when I hear that is it's interesting to make some of our more dense areas. I know I'm using dense and it's not going to be right technically, but by, filling some of those spaces in our more dense areas, but leaving a certain segment of our zone community nice and wide open. I don't know, I'm trying to kind of wrap my brain around that. I am interested in it. I just don't know if this list is expansive enough, and I want to get in the weeds, which I know I'm really not supposed to do right now because I'm interested in how low we're talking and what other guidelines go along with lowering those lot limits in order to ensure that we're still protecting the integrity of some of those areas. And for people, I can imagine some lots in my neighborhood that I could totally see this would work great for. And I'm curious how then we would make sure it still fits within the character of the neighborhood. There are certain areas that don't get too saturated or too overwhelmed, I'm trying not to go there, but that's why I'm like, yeah, I am tentatively interested, but man, do I want to get into the details.
Could I ask a quick follow-up question?
Sure.
Apologies, Trustee Hazelton. Should we be looking at the state lots as an option?
I want to look at everything as an option. I can't say yes or no because I'm only one of 7. And also I want to respect that if you heard from the community that there's not a lot of interest in that, then I want to be respectful of that. I guess the reason I'm surprised is because, or not surprised, but what's compelling to me about it is that it feels like a very distinctive split then, right, between certain areas of our community and a demographic of people that live there, and then areas of our community and certain demographic people who live there, and trying to squeeze in more so that other areas get to stay wide open and with large lot sizes, if you catch my drift.
That is a common dynamic. It's
Yeah.
not unique to this community.
Yeah,
And,
I know, definitely not.
I would describe the feedback received from residents with respect to changing anything about estate lots as being vocal, direct opposition. So it was very clear to us that that was not something that the members of the community that we spoke to were interested in.
Yeah, and I'm curious if most of those members of the community live in estate lots, right?
We did not gather that.
Yeah, I know you didn't, but that's why I think that's where trying to tackle a community-wide problem in only specific areas is where that's where I'm just trying to wrap my brain around. But sorry, I've held the mic for too long. I am in favor. I'm interested. I wouldn't want to go too small, and I'd like to see a proposal for beyond just the R districts, but I understand that we're hearing from the community. I want to respect that too.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kirby's got it right. It's right in the controversial part of this town. It's right smack in the middle of it. And, to the extent we exclude this E and estate lots, we might be having an impact on infill development, which is, maybe we need to get rezoning in order to do that. I get that. But I think by excluding estates, you're essentially leaving that to rezoning instead of lot size. And that might be appropriate. And I know there is a lot of opposition in the estate zoning areas to denser development, which is what a lot size thing would do. And there's no question it would make denser development. On the other hand, there's great opportunities it seems to me for increased density without a significant change in the neighborhood with lot size issues. Because there are plenty of large lots that could be split into 2 lots, as an example. And 2 lots would not necessarily be as objectionable to people as a rezoning that, significantly increases the density. So I'm more inclined to agree with Trustee Hazelton that we ought to look at estate lots. I'm not sure we'll do anything with them because I kind of, this is a deeper question than prepared to deal with today. But anyway, by the way, I actually have a pretty small lot. I think it's 0.39 acres. So I kind of converted, I was trying to figure out how many square foot in an acre. So I figured it to be 43,560. Is that right?
That's the number.
Okay. So a quarter acre lot is a little more than 10,000 square feet. And a quarter acre lot to me is a pretty small lot for at least for a single family dwelling. It's not, I mean, maybe you can put a duplex on it or, something like that, but I don't know. I'm having difficulty thinking that particularly on the smaller lot size, the 0.25 lot size, that it really makes much sense to reduce that square footage requirement there because I think it's 10,000 square feet, which is less than the quarter acre. So,
Just a couple of observations
Yeah.
just to contextualize the conversation.
please.
So in the communities that I'm very familiar with, having worked there extensively, Crested Butte, Aspen, and Telluride, which are different insofar as the core of those towns are a grid system.
Yeah.
And so you have alley-served gridded lots, so
Right.
the context is a little different. But the historic lot size in those communities is give or take 5,000 square feet, just depending upon the depth of the lot. And all 3 of those communities allow for lot splits on lots that are at or above the historic lot size. So you can split a 5,000 into a 2,500. And the numbers are a little different in each community, but that's sort of broadly the context. And with respect to the estate lots here in Estes Park, I think a question we would want to understand as we dug into the numbers more on estate lots is what type of housing product would we yield if we were to permit estate lots to be split?
Yeah.
We haven't done that analysis, but I think from a community policy standpoint, it would be a legitimate line of inquiry to understand because
I agree.
if you're splitting a very large lot
Totally
into
agree.
2 large lots, is that getting at the board's policy objectives? And that's an open question.
Yes. Okay. And I have one other thing that kind of goes back in your slides further. So we just, this town just passed a citizen-initiated ordinance that requires certain additional consents in order to rezone or have a PUD. And I want to focus on the PUD aspect of that because I think it is true that PUDs, at least down in the valley, happen all the time in residential zones, and that it is, viewed, at least by people in this industry, as an appropriate place to use a PUD. But we just had this vote that requires neighbor approval for PUDs. So I feel like we're going to get a lot of pushback on expanding PUDs to residential zones despite all that. And I'm not sure I fully understand the opposition on PUDs other than it seems to me it probably expresses a distrust of town government because the town government is the one that can waive some of these requirements through a PUD process. Now, there are standards for it and whatnot. And so I'm a little concerned about where we go on that particular point. And it may be something that we may need to defer till a later time, depending on what happens with ballot issue 300. So I don't know, just context.
No, appreciate it, Trustee Brown. We have a section on PUDs. Happy to open it up more for that, or if you feel it's appropriate, we can skip it as well.
I won't echo my agreeances with the fellow trustees that have spoke. I would like to have you look at that estate, just because I would like to know, okay, if we did approach that, what would that look like, right? Because I don't want our community to be, so split. You have luxurious large lots over here, and then everybody that makes the cogwheels work lives over here. I mean, I really would like to see a more balanced approach, but I don't know how that would look because, I respect their size of their lot too. So I would like to have more information on that. And yeah, I'm anxious to see how the PUD, I'm like, well, lot size is not going to, with the vote for the 300, how, I'm not sure how changing the lot size is going to allow any of those things to move forward, where it may have, I don't even think it will with zoning though, because they still have the opportunity to say yes or no. So yeah, it's an interesting concept. I would like for you to look at the whole picture of it. I think the really small lots, I would like to kind of shy away from, just because I think that will not be the look that Estes Park is looking for, is to have super density in areas. We already kind of have that, and I would hate to see it get really noticeable. Thanks.
We're probably exceeding the time that you had allocated to this particular one. I think we have quite a few more components that we want to get through too. I think Mayor Pro Tem Sinak has a comment. I'm probably leaning toward what Trustee Youngland and Mayor Pro Tem said also about shying away from the ultra small.
The other question, and you went through this a little bit, but just refresh my memory in 3 seconds. When you talk about all this community input, where was that coming from? Exactly.
Community survey, open house, the multiple open houses we had, intercept surveys, focus groups.
Okay, and that's the reason I wanted to ask you. I cannot imagine that everybody you talk to has an estate lot. Absolutely not. And I'd probably guess that it's probably not even half the people have estate lots. So this thinking that the people that are saying that have estate lots, I don't have an estate lot, but I don't want the estate lots all broken up either, because Estes Park does have a certain look. And some of those are the big lots, maybe out on, in the outskirts, that have the bigger lots and not be all dense in different areas. So for us to sit here and say that the community has spoken, but that's probably the community that has the estate lots that said this. Obviously, that's not the case. So if we're really looking at what the community is saying, I think that we have to keep that in mind, that maybe they don't want estates put into this. And it wasn't all the people that have the estate lots that say this. So
As I noted earlier, we did not collect address
Right.
as a data point for any of the feedback.
100%. I'm just assuming that everybody that spoke with is not an estate-owned, area, because that's not exactly the highest part of our population.
Sure.
So I just think we have to be careful about thinking that it's just the people that have the estates that said this. When we just said it was overwhelmingly the population said, but they don't want that to happen. So I just think we have to be careful. That's all.
That being said, have you collected sufficient thoughts at this point to see a direction?
We have. Appreciate
Okay.
the input.
In that case, I'd say let's move along to the next piece.
Perfect.
Setbacks.
Setbacks. So just as a refresher, setback is generally the distance between the edge of a property line and the start of a structure. And in a condition like Estes Park where you don't have a lot coverage requirement for the footprint of the building relative to the size of the property, your setback requirements de facto become that requirement. Setbacks are important in that, particularly when we're starting to think about duplexes and triplexes, the larger the footprint of a building that I can have, the more units I can put in side by side. And I've got a visual of that here in a moment. I'll say that Estes Park's setbacks, they're relatively in line with what we see from other communities. However, there are certain home type conditions where we've seen setbacks drop down to a 5-foot setback for both side and rear yards to allow a little larger structure. Or dropping the front yard setback to a 10-foot setback to come a little closer to the road's edge. We're not going to propose a 0 lot line setback where you come up right to the lot line. I don't think that makes sense here. But I do think it doesn't sound like a lot, a change of 5 feet, but it can have an impact on your ability to do something, particularly on some of the smaller existing lots within the community. So setbacks can also be a really helpful tool when we start thinking about ADUs, particularly on lots that can absorb them. They can allow you to put a sufficient amount of distance between the primary structure and the ADU and kind of move it towards the back of the lot. But in certain, they can be a really helpful condition to kind of allow those to slot into very particular areas of the property where you already have an existing primary structure. Here's just some quick photography of some projects with 5-foot setbacks. This is one in Telluride, and this is very modern, very nice. But I wanted to show this to you because of the context that this project was built in. So this was actually more of an urban context where they had a lot become available. And because they had limited setbacks, they were able to actually slot in 3 units in this smaller lot side by side with some space in between. And it really was a kind of a strategic project. But when we start to think about these more constrained conditions of communities, particularly older communities like Estes Park, having some variability in setback can allow you to get a little creative when you think about new housing, or as I mentioned before, include an ADU. This is a really nice example of triplex put in with, I believe this was 5-foot setback on the front, 5-foot setback in the rear, and a 10-foot setback on the side yards. But this really allowed this particular developer in Park City to maximize the size of that lot to fit 3 units in. So it can be a strategic decision to help you get a little bit more bang for your buck, for lack of a better word, on a property. So a question for you all, similar line of questioning, is if there's support for us to explore reducing setback requirements to allow for larger footprints of buildings, and in doing so, potentially different housing typologies.
Yes.
Yes. I've got some concerns from one standpoint is we've got insurance companies telling everybody they need to cut down their trees within 30 feet of their house, yet we're going to build another house within 10 feet of a house. And I look at, my perspective of this has changed a lot since the fires in Los Angeles and the fires in Marshall, is how close, I look at these houses and I think, wow, we've just got dominoes that would be going down the road if we did a fire and in a wildfire prone areas. So I'm not sure it's maybe through building materials and things that can be mitigated, but I do have concerns with buildings being that close to each other. I mean, that's been my biggest concern downtown is one building catches on fire and it just takes out the whole downtown. We're so lucky with I remember the fire where the slab is, and it's so amazing that didn't go any further than that. Thanks to our fire department and the people who did that. It was an amazing job, but I would hate to plan on hoping for amazing firefighters, and that's our plan for the future.
So that's my only concern with that, is from a safety standpoint in a community that has a high wildfire risk.
If, in the interest of trying to get some consensus or at least some feedback we can respond to, if the setback changes came with some understanding about the relationship between exterior materials, sprinkler requirements, and other sort of fire spread mitigation measures, would that change your thinking about changing setbacks?
It could. Yeah, we all think about building setbacks, but we also have against lot lines, but we also have setbacks with respect to things like, rivers and streams. And, it also is a consideration whether we're measuring the setback to the deck or to the main structure. And so this is, in my mind, a little more complicated than it at first appears. And I think it's important for us to think about those as well. I am liaison to the Board of Adjustment, which considers variances. And so it will enter into that as well, because if we do reduce setbacks, we should have less variance requests, I guess. That would make sense. And if we change, how we measure to a building relative to a deck or something, that will have that impact too. And I don't know if that's good or bad, to be honest. It is a consideration in this, but I do want us all to think about the wetland setbacks as well as the lot line setbacks. And I don't know if there are any other types of setbacks to think about, but you normally think of it as a lot line thing, but it's not necessarily that. So.
If I could just respond to that very quickly, Trustee Brown. Typically, we write the code, so if you have let's just say you have a lot that goes right up to a wetland, the overarching wetland setback that's applicable to the entire community would be applicable to that property, would supersede underlying setback requirements. So we're creating that uniformity, no matter the size of the lot or orientation to that. We have the same setback from that resource.
So is that a separate town setback, or is this something that's placed on the town because of, Colorado Parks and Recreation or whatever, because these are waterways we're talking about? Is this a setback that we don't decide, or is it one that we decide as well as somebody else looking over our shoulder?
In my experience, and feel free to jump in, it depends if it's a federally designated wetland. If it's a federally designated wetland, there are requirements that we must follow. If it's not federally designated but still has some wetland properties and is identified by the town or some CPAW, there are certain opportunities for the town to set their own standards.
Okay, I guess what I'd like to understand better is, where do we have those sorts of federally designated things? Because we have, like Fall River comes down, and I can imagine that might be federally designated, and there are a lot of waterways here. So it would be helpful, I think, for us to understand that. That's all I'm saying.
I'm sorry, Phil. Typically, just to differentiate a wetland from like a riparian area, which is what I think of as a stream, generally towns have the ability to set the requirement for a riparian setback, but the federal designation for wetlands, like a large open area, that would carry in its own requirement. Apologies, Phil. if I
No,
interrupted you.
that's exactly it. If it's a navigable waterway, or it's a wetland that's designated by the feds, then the feds' rules apply. Otherwise, the town has broad regulatory discretion to decide whether that waterway, like Fall River, deserves some level of increased protection beyond what's provided by underlying zoning.
Gondoliers in Estes Park. I know there will be malleability. This is general guidelines at this point, and obviously we're not putting final stamps on it, so you've probably got what you need here. I saw a few nodding heads, and Trustee Lancaster, kind of with the appropriate protections and things, would have a little more interest in that. So,
One follow-up question, if I could, Mr. Mayor. Should we be exploring the estate zones as well for this?
I think not.
yes,
Myself, you know, what are they, 25 and 50 or something like
Yeah.
that? And then I guess what I would say is that remains to be determined about the lot size. It's the same issue.
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
see any point if we're not going to
No.
allow additional buildings.
right.
What's the point of doing anything with the setbacks?
Okay. Thank you.
Unless you wanted larger homes on estate lots, that would be a natural consequence of that.
Well, the size of a home, they have to be on an estate lot, and you could fit with 5-foot setbacks. No, I don't think we want that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
5,000 square foot mansion on a 5,200 square foot lot, yeah. Okay, parking requirements.
So, I think Eric has described this eloquently before, but when we're thinking about the box that we're going to work within to build a housing unit on a lot, parking is one of those unique opportunities where you can exercise some discretion in terms of the amount of parking required that doesn't necessarily yield the same sort of character impacts as, say, building height or setbacks, where the visual experience from the pedestrian zone of a more dense or taller neighborhood is fundamentally different than if you're walking through the same neighborhood. You may or may not notice that there's more or less parking on an individual lot. So we see parking as an opportunity to modulate some development standards that may result in more housing units on a lot-by-lot basis or a development-by-development basis without significantly altering character. Now, of course, the caveat or the asterisk that goes along with that is if you underpark a development, how does that impact adjacent properties? And that is, of course, the give and take. None of these topics come without some kind of give and take, and we recognize that, and we're doing our best to kind of contextualize that for you. Please.
If I could add one more thing. Parking is, from a developing standpoint, it's dead weight from a financial pro forma. It's the thing that nobody wants to pay for, but that can drag down the performance of a project. And particularly when we're thinking about like structured parking or having to park a vehicle within a covered space, that can add a financial burden to a project that can tilt the scales. And may not seem like a lot, but it oftentimes can be the make or break for a project, is how we have to park it. So apologies, Philip.
No, thank you. So your current parking standards for residential zones are shown here in the table. 2 per dwelling unit for single family, 2 family and townhome. It's pretty standard, maybe not in an urban environment, but in a rural or suburban context, that's a pretty standard number. But it does offer some room for some flexibility if the town's interested in doing that. Your multifamily standards, I would describe, and Eric, please weigh in on this, I would describe as a little on the heavy side. I think there's more room in your multifamily standards to allow for maybe the development of a couple of more units on site as opposed to a couple of more cars on site without creating that sort of spillover parking impact that you're going to start to hear from neighbors about. From my personal experience, in communities that are geographically constrained, that are environmentally constrained and environmentally concerned, right? You care about ridgelines, you care about elk, you care about trees. These are all justifiable interests and concerns in the community. Being able to dial down parking and help realize a little bit more housing on a development by development basis is a good path to go, and certainly something that a lot of similar gateway and mountain communities in the state of Colorado and around the West are doing. I've helped several in my career adjust that parking number to get to a place where, as Eric said, there's a little less dead weight on development. You're getting a couple more units on site, but you're not creating those really negative neighborhood impacts that people don't like, justifiably. So again, just for illustrative purposes, by removing a handful of parking spaces, you can get a handful of more units on a site. There are some communities that go a little bit farther with, in terms of connecting their parking requirements to multimodal transit facilities, and we've had conversations about trail and sidewalk connectivity in your community. I don't believe there's a bike share program here, but in communities with bike share programs or with robust year-round transit programs, being able to offer developers a chance to add a bike share station or add a transit facility in exchange for the parking reduction is a value add from a pro forma standpoint. It's a value add from a unit yield standpoint. I think in this community, focusing on sidewalk extensions and other pedestrian facilities would be a really good trade-off for the town board to explore if you're interested in modulating parking.
And with parking, it's at least, given the standards you all have today, it's not like you're gonna get 50 more units in. I think the reductions that we're thinking would allow you to get 1 or 2 more units in, but that's 1 or 2 more units you didn't have before.
Yeah.
So it's incremental, it's small, but it can make a difference between having a duplex on a property or triplex.
And because you've been staring at our faces most of this process, I'll just remind you, we have an excellent parking and transportation firm on our team who's prepared to assist us in looking at the parking and transportation networks in your community and understanding how to modulate these numbers to get to kind of a sweet spot, if the town board is interested in doing that.
So would you say our numbers are too high for what the, what
He
an
said on
average
the
user should
multi,
be?
he thought.
The
Mul-
multi, I
yeah.
think they're a little high. I don't
Okay.
think for a single unit, you need 1.5. I think a 1.25 or 1 could make sense in certain cases.
Yeah,
If we just go back to them here, for a single family, 2-family townhome, 2 per dwelling unit, maybe for single family makes sense. If you're doing a townhome, maybe to go down to 1.75 or 1.5. So it's not
Okay.
a tremendous drop, but it is a drop.
I mean, I love the idea. I'm just concerned about, if you go to your graphic, the next one, which maybe is just the way you graphed it, but that looks great, but where do those other 3 cars go? You know, are they parked on the street?
Yeah.
Are they trying to get permits to park in our parking that we just
They,
talked about?
they have scooters.
They have
That's their
scooters.
second vehicle.
Yeah. I could see them all on a day like today with some of our 80-year-old residents running around town to safely on a scooter.
I think and Eric has supported several large-scale developments that have worked through these problems. I think the key understanding is that not every household has the same number of vehicles associated with the
Right.
household. And there are formulas for getting at, based on the unit type and the specific community, there are formulas for understanding whether that 1.75 or 1.5 is actually going to create a problem or not.
Well, I guess I'd be comfortable with it if the data's there and we've got the people who've done it and supported it. And it sounds like maybe on the multifamily, we're a little over the top, and maybe on the single family, we're about where we need to be. Is that what I'm hearing from you guys? Thank you.
But there's other considerations over time, you know, with mass transit as we continue to try and move in the direction of minimizing vehicles. You know, people in a 1-bedroom apartment, how many vehicles are they going to have? Other kind of things. So I'm in favor.
There are certain mountain communities, Steamboat's a great example, where the transit is so good, you do not need a car.
Yeah.
You can get pretty much anywhere in Steamboat.
We want to get there.
Yeah.
And, well, we can, I think, unpack this more later, but I would just note for the board's consideration as well, you can put in place fee in lieu of parking requirements where you're actually taking in revenue that can go to finance a upgraded transportation system that can create public revenue to support the parking program that we heard about earlier in this meeting. So there's a lot of tools that we can explore here.
Okay, I think it makes perfect sense in multifamily. I kind of wonder about, you know, a 2-family, you're not necessarily suggesting any changes in that. But if you could go from a 2-family to a 3-family, that's a big deal. And so I think we ought to look at 2-family as well. I wouldn't change it at all for single family. It makes no sense to me to change that. But the others, I think we can go beyond multifamily.
Good.
Okay. We talked about PUD earlier, and I would just note, I think to start the discussion, PUD processes are a negotiation. And that negotiation can be perceived by members in the community as costing the community something. It could also be perceived as creating benefit for the community. And honestly, that determination is made on a sort of project by project basis, right? Our assessment of the development code in its current form and the built environment as it exists today, and frankly the sort of constraints, geographic and annexation constraints that your community faces, PUD would create an opportunity on a site-by-site, project-by-project basis for the town board, your planning and zoning commission prior to the town board, to negotiate terms around all the development metrics we've discussed, plus public goods like parks or trails or transit facilities, whatever that might be, that could add value to your built environment, that could help you achieve several overlapping and complementary policy objectives in the comprehensive plan. And that flexibility, when structured properly with good code language, doesn't have to come with cost to the community, and it certainly doesn't bind the town board and the community to any future decision other than being open to entering into a negotiation from one site to the next. So at sort of 30,000 feet, that's how we arrived at wanting to have this discussion with you this evening. Adding PUD to the residential zones would simply make more of your community eligible for entering into a broader discussion about what is the highest and best use of that land relative to what your community goals are around housing or transit or open space or whatever the other issues are. And PUDs can result in the more efficient use of land. We showed a sort of graphic earlier in the presentation, same number of lots on a given lot or on a given parcel, same number of lots, let's call it 50, where each lot's the same size and the whole parcel's taken up by the development and the rights of way. And then the same parcel size with the same number of lots with smaller lot sizes, and you've conserved maybe 30-40% of the parcel, and that's just conceptually. But that's one of the advantages of being able to offer PUDs in residential zone districts. And it's supported by some of the feedback that we heard during the engagement process around folks being interested in more and different housing types, being interested in variations in lot size, and certainly being interested in open space and natural resource protection. Encouraging the preservation of sites' natural characteristics is, I think, a huge advantage of PUDs. Minimizing the impact of development as seen from roadways, streets, and then also being able to thoughtfully integrate more roadways and transit facilities into the community and putting that responsibility on developers also creates another opportunity through PUDs. It can add value in all kinds of different ways, and we're interested in hearing your feedback very conceptually about whether or not designing regulations to facilitate potential PUDs where the underlying zoning is currently residential is something that you feel like would be supported by the comprehensive plan and help achieve your objectives with respect to housing development in particular in the community. Again, these are just sort of conceptual graphics to illustrate how PUD can result in more housing at an appropriate scale while supporting other community objectives. And I would just note, we had a fun back and forth about this with staff. One thing PUDs don't do is increase regulatory clarity. They don't do that for staff, and they don't do that for developers. And that, as long as everybody goes into that conversation, with the same understanding, then that's okay. But it is definitely more process and more discussion, and can certainly make more work for Steve and his team in certain instances. And so again, the question to the board is, are you conceptually interested in introducing PUD as an option where the underlying zoning is residential? The resulting development, depending upon its location, could be mixed use, but the underlying zoning is residential.
Yes, for me.
Yes. I obviously, again, we can shape things as we get to later stages in this process of the development code, but also, when application for PUD comes in. Now, right now, we have changes in the dynamics related to rezonings and PUDs, and for the foreseeable future with our recently passed ballot initiative, you know, whatever lot you're looking at here, there'd have to be approval of the PUD design. And, well, that's a self-limiting and self-balancing thing. Maybe everybody will love the idea, and the town board will love the idea, and the very creative use of that land will go forth, and maybe the neighbors won't like that idea and probably never gets to us at that point. So I'd say, sure, yeah, let's go for it.
I'm interested in it, to understand it better. I'm not interested in approving it or saying this is a good idea, but I would like to know more about it. I think it does create some opportunities we have to consider.
I like PUDs. I think it brings out some creativity and can do some things and not get stuck within a certain box. I'm like Mark, I mean, I'm not carte blanche, but certainly open to considering it and having it as another tool in the toolbox.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Appreciate it. That's it.
I thought there were 7 or 8.
We can keep going.
Yeah, well, and if there are additional
Don't worry, I
thoughts.
do have additional comments, so.
I know yeah, there were several things that were not in consideration now, so I guess, yeah, we did get down to those 3 or 4. Trustee Hazelton.
Thanks. I was just taking notes as we were going through this, and I think I just kind of want to clarify and maybe add some additional context that I think, okay, so the two-pronged approach, right, that I think you've alluded to or we've talked about here is like one side of it is updating the development code to just, there's some general housekeeping we need to do with it. It's been a long time, you know. We need to align it with current needs and the new comp plan. We've had changes to the environment and our climate, and like all of those things I would bucket maybe under one prong. And the other prong is like this bigger conversation of some serious identified problems that our community has been facing for a long time that we have to make changes in order to address. And so one of the things that you had mentioned, I can't remember if it was Eric or Philip, but you said that it was about what truly allows us to move the needle, and what you're proposing here are the things we're considering. Are they just doing a little bit here and a little bit there? And yeah, it's better than nothing, but is it really addressing some of the significant issues that we've faced? Or is it accommodating community feedback and trying to solve a few issues, but really we might still have some significant hurdles to overcome even under this. And I think you're probably getting what I'm saying is I don't want to make huge changes that the community has said they don't want, that, you know, maybe solve these housing problems that we have on one end. But I also don't want to say, okay, well, it sounds like the community doesn't want to see any changes. And then, for the next 4 years, we continue to have, or whatever, 5, 10, 15 years, people coming and saying, how come I can't find housing for my employees? Or more importantly, and this is, Marie's comments about the estate piece, I don't want it to be perceived that I think everybody who responded has an estate lot and said we want to put it in residential. Like, that's not what I was implying or suggesting whatsoever. What I am thinking about are beyond just our workforce too, our aging population, that we have so many older members of our community, and we have talked about the idea of multi-generational family living and them being able to have assistance, like stay independent in their homes, but have assistance with, maybe if they could have a caregiver come or different family members. So I think those are the kinds of things I'm trying to address, and what I'm concerned about is if what you've presented for residential housing, proposals are enough to truly move the needle. Also knowing that just because we allow changes to happen doesn't mean everyone's going to make those changes. If we allow decreased lot size in a state, that doesn't mean every single estate parcel is going to decrease their lot size, right? It's just an option. So I don't know. I think I kind of wanted just to expand on that a little bit, because I don't want it to be implied that's like one side versus the other. It is a community-wide problem, and I think similar to the conversation we're having about the PUD piece, as many tools as we can have in the toolkit is where I'm inclined to go, even if that means across broader zones or a broader selection of zones. So I'm also interested in why the density, you talked a little bit about it, Eric, and I wrote down what you said, but I kind of want to poke at you a little bit more about why density changes. Philip's like, see ya. Why we're not considering density changes, and we don't have to talk about it now, but you know, especially because we were almost done early. But I'm curious about that as well.
Yeah, I can kind of pick up that apart if
Please.
it's okay, Trustee Hazelton.
Yeah.
I think we're getting at incremental change. I don't think we're creating conditions where you're going to have sweeping changes to the community. I think if you wanted to discuss height, that has a lot of impact to have some pretty significant changes in the community. I mean, that's like the golden tool to create some really, you know, some more housing. But we've heard that height is not as a
Yeah,
non-starter.
this board's pretty strong on that.
Right, and I'm providing a response to it. So I think we're trying to create incremental change within the kind of
Yeah.
feedback that we've received from you all, from the community on not wanting sweeping things. To your point, we can set this underlying condition and change them, but nothing's going to happen if folks don't want to do it. We're just trying to create the parameters to allow it. So I think in my mind, the change that we're creating is something that really won't visually or significantly manifest itself for 5 or 10 years. I don't think lots turn over that quickly. I don't think projects are happening that much.
I think ADUs are a really great example of what Eric is talking about. The community allows for ADUs, and yet they don't get built. And why is that? It's because the underlying economics don't work. And so we can modulate different development standards, and that will change the underlying economics a little bit and create the incremental change that he's talking about. And that'll get measured on a year's, multi-year, multi-decade timeline. And from my professional experience working in resort and mountain communities, these are small, sensitive development environments. And, you know, to the extent that a community could go too far in either closing off the economics by being too strict with development or opening the valve too far and seeing too much redevelopment, it's really hard to kind of undo that. And so what we've heard from the public, from the Planning and Zoning Commission, I think in these really healthy discussions, has been some concern about going too far too fast. And I agree with Eric's assessment that where we're gliding towards or approaching is incremental change that's thoughtful with respect to context.
That's helpful. I think you guys probably understand better than anybody that we've got a lot of things that we are often charged with fixing or addressing. And if we can't have the tools to fix or address those, like what are we doing up here? Like, what's the point of this job, right? You know, so I think that those last comments are really helpful, is trying to find that balance so that it could be enough. But I'm probably a little bit more willing to take wider risks than maybe some of my other board members, but it's helpful.
And if I could respond to just 2 other points from your original, I've got a list running in my head. Sorry, Trustee Hazelton.
No, you're great.
On the estate lot, the estate lot splits are 9 times out of 10 when I see that happen with an estate lot, it's a family who splits a lot so their kids can build up a home next door.
That's what I'm
That's
thinking.
how I see it happen in 90% of the cases.
That's exactly what's going through my brain on those.
So that's kind of how I see it play out, and I think this board's direction is worth us exploring that. I'll come back to the density question too. We know density is a really sensitive topic. Right now, looking at the R districts, I forget which one specifically has 8 units to an acre density amount. The other 3 of the 4 have 4 units per acre. We could make them all 8. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. We also know that there's a lot of concern in the community around density, and the districts that we're talking about are already the ones, to the points that have been made, that are already feeling kind of dense. So I guess we're just trying to respond to both community sentiment, but also the conditions that already exist within those spaces and not go too far.
I just want to follow up on one thing, and Trustee Hazelton raised it. Well, actually, I've got two things. But first of all, we have a very family-oriented resort area compared to many of the other resort areas in Colorado. And so the splitting of lots like that for family really fits in with our vision of the future, I think, of this community. So I kind of agree with that. The other thing that we haven't talked about that I would like to have a little more attention spent on this is seasonal housing, insofar as it's very easy to kind of focus on the long-term things of, people living here full-time. But it is a unique situation here, as it is in other communities. And so I'd be very interested in what sort of things can help most on seasonal housing. And this will entail invariably a lot of private investment to do it too. And, some coordination with employers and others here. So I'd like, and maybe you've got this on your agenda for a future session, I don't know, but seasonal housing is a major concern here as well, and a really difficult thing to do since it sits empty for so much of the year, so.
And we touched on that several work sessions ago in the retrofitting of outdated lodging properties to dormitory style housing, and putting the conditions and the framework in for the code to allow that. So I think that's kind of where our minds are headed with seasonal housing.
That specific response with the lodging conversion, that's on the list for us to include in draft language for your future review.
And I also think like duplexes, single family homes that have a lot of bedrooms and could lend itself to a nice duplex work well as well for our lodging owners. So I want to make sure, which I think we're addressing that. So I don't want anybody to throw oranges at me or apples, but I have a question. Why is tiny homes such a taboo when that's exactly what you're building in a PDU? So if you have a community that you have a developer that would like to make a tiny home village, maybe put 15 of these small units up, what is the difference between having 15 residentials build a tiny home in their back of their lot? I mean, I've just never understood that.
I'm going to be mayor of the Munchkin City here. No, it's a good question. Take it forth.
I mean, because those are, they're affordable. They're, some people don't want massive space. That would work fine. But I don't know if it just got the bad rap, when it exploded years back. But if you could address that.
I think to understand the question better, I think it's important to make sure we're all using the same terminology. A tiny home is typically 300 square feet or less. It's often built on a trailer or some kind of mobile platform. Sometimes they don't have bathroom facilities. I'm not being critical of them, I'm just saying that is a specific housing typology. And it's a response to several different conditions in a community. Maybe there's an affordability problem. Maybe there's a lack of availability of land. Or maybe an individual resident or consumer just decided, this is how I want to live. An ADU is typically more in the range of 500 to 1,200 square feet. It is stick-built, it's on a slab or on a foundation that is attached to the ground, and when you're standing on the sidewalk looking at it, it presents as just a very small home. But it has all of the building code requirements, HVAC requirements, life safety requirements of a single-family home. It's just shrunken down.
Well, our policy, you can't build any more than 800. Is that flat 800, 820 square feet? Anyway, it's around 800.
Right.
But So if you take that out and everybody has a bathroom and you have it stick built and it has a foundation and all that, then that concept is not being tabooed. It's just the trailer look is what, because to me, I think you can have a tiny home not on a mobile platform, and you can have a bathroom, and you can have, I mean, 500 to 800 square feet is not much to me. That's a tiny home. So I was just wondering. I just don't want. I think there's room for that concept, and I guess I didn't understand that the definition of a tiny home was A, B, C, D, and ADUs was or PD, whatever.
PUD.
PUDs were over here. I'm on ADUs for some reason. PUDs are XYZ. So I want to make sure people are keeping that open because I think it's a good concept.
You're thinking mini rather than micro.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we're at 800. I don't think that's very big.
And one thing that you all can do, for instance, in the PUD, when you're negotiating the development agreement, if you want to put a minimum unit size, and that's not you're concerned about, you can put that into the development agreement and see if developer, if you're concerned about having a condition where you have these 300 square foot, homes, there is flexibility ideally when you're negotiating that PUD to kind of head that off.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I think it was Trustee Hazelton who brought back a theme we had a couple months ago on another discussion about getting a lot of tools in the toolbox, and I think the discussion has kind of leaned in that way, as though, the first item with the really close crammed stuff, we didn't go much for that, but in general, I think we let a lot more tools in the toolbox. Any other questions or comments? Anything else from you fellas? Did we ever get your name?
Philip Sapino.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
Oh, I think Eric introduced me.
Yeah, okay, all right.
For the record. Yeah.
Just making sure. Yeah, I mean, not for some official purpose, just socialization here. So, yeah, well, thanks for being here. As always, Eric, you guys bring a really good experience and knowledge, and we appreciate it. It's very complex, and thank goodness for breaking it into bite-sized chunks for us over time like this. All right, I think we're good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Have a great holiday.
We can get to future study session agenda items. Town Administrator.
Mayor, I have two. One, the Estes Valley Watershed Coalition would like to come talk to you about a proposal to update the wildlife habitat assessment, January 13th. And then I'd like to schedule, approved unscheduled, but targeting February for a Whimsadoodle Bighorn parking lot update. It's been a while since we had a conversation with the board. Just want to make sure that we have a chance for a public update and talk through where that discussion stands and where it stands relative to our Bighorn parking structure conversations.
Thumbs up on both, I'd say. And thanks, Ed. Yeah, I hear a lot about the wildlife thing, and certainly Whimsadoodle is a popular topic these days, so getting updates on that as it progresses and discussions progress, very good. Okay. Trustees, is there any other item for bringing forth for study session at this point? Okay, with that, this study session is adjourned. We will be back for the regular